to On the Road and Hampton Roads. My name is Andy Bond, and Steve Goad and I are touring our area, meeting the entrepreneurs that are bringing the American dream to life. This morning we're in the studio of the Steve Batten Show. Steve, thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to.
Could you tell us a little bit about you and how you got to where you are now?
Well, I was born in a very early age. I'm sorry. I almost used the line from the Steve Martin movie. I was born a poor... Are you familiar with the line? You need to go watch the Steve Martin movie.
I know the, the area,
No,
the arrow through the head. And hey, I'm in the phone book.
Right. I've been doing radio, Andy, since I was 12 years old. Started in a small station in Okeechobee, Florida. Got a ride to the radio station from the owner of the station because he actually needed to load some gear, and I didn't know that. I thought I was going to take a tour of the radio station, so I was just a free helping hand. But been doing this since I was 12. Love radio, and I've been a talk radio junkie since I was a kid. When most kids were listening to a ball game on the transistor under their pillow,
that's right.
I was listening to talk radio. I was a weird kid. So years ago, I had an opportunity to fill in for who is now my competition for about a year and a half. When he was off the air for whatever reason, I would do the morning talk show. Got bitten by the bug. Several years ago, I was actually among the unemployed. The company I worked for closed up here in Norfolk and decided to operate from Washington, D.C. So I took a little time off and was listening to the radio one morning, and the fellow who is now my competition was talking about Christians and people who believe in God. And he said this before, and I'd heard it, but something just struck a nerve on this particular day. It was December 7th, 2009. I remember it very well. It was Pearl Harbor Day. Pearl Harbor got mentioned once. It was the day that we had some rallies for the SEALs, Matthew McCabe and the other two who punched the terrorist in the lip, supposedly. No mention of the rally for the SEALs. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. This is a military community. We should be supporting those guys. By the way, who amongst us wouldn't want to line up? And my friend, I thought that'd be a good promotion. Let's make a caricature of the terrorist and let people line up and take a punch at them in support of the SEALs. I think that could have been fun. No mention of the SEALs whatsoever. And then the final hour of the show was devoted to, if you're a Christian, you're a mystic, and the Bible is akin to Mother Goose, Book of Fairy Tales. I kind of went ballistic. And later that day, when my Kelly got home, I was still kind of ranting and raving. I'd been out in the garage screaming at the radio, which is ridiculous. The radio can't hear me, right? I'm screaming at the radio, and she's like, what's wrong with you? And I told her what happened, and she said, well, didn't you tell me your pastor said, if you're not part of the solution, you're probably part of the problem? And I said to her, of course, well, I hate you now, because now I got to go back to work. So that was the day we decided to start the radio show. And quite honestly, Andy, I believe that our country is headed in the right direction, and if you aren't part of the solution, you are part of the problem. So that's why we started this radio show. We felt there was a niche in the market created by my competition, and I found as we've gone down this journey, down this road, that it's not a niche, it's a gaping wide hole, and we intend to fill it.
Well, I get a sense that you have this passion that you expressed in your garage.
Yes.
And every morning when we listen to the show, your love of radio comes out.
Sure.
So it's a small business, though, isn't it, really?
My business? Yeah, yes. Absolutely. My show is a small business unto itself. We basically buy time from the radio station, and we sell commercials. That's the short version of how it works. So people who believe the way I do, who own a business, buy commercials, not just because they want to support me, but because they want to reach my listeners, other people who also believe as I do, or the opposite belief, folks who listen in because they don't like what you have to say. Howard Stern, of all people, I hate to invoke the name Howard Stern, but he understood early on that I don't care if you love me or hate me, just spell my name right. There was an old survey that was done, it was in the movie about him, as a matter of fact, that they did a survey because the guy wanted to get rid of him, the program director at WNBC in New York. And he did a survey, and he found that the people that liked him listened to him for about 45 minutes. The people that hated him listened to him for an hour and 15. And that was an exaggeration, but it was true that the people who hated him listened to him more. So I just want to get the view out there of what we need to do, in my view, to get this country back on track. And it's a conversation with the listener. So it's growing.
And so do you see that intersection between what you love, what you believe in, and what you do as an unusual place to be?
Andy, I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think that's the question you're asking, a lot of entrepreneurs do what they love because they have a passion for it, and because they're doing what they love, they're good at it. Hopefully I'm good at what I do, and because they're good at it, they do well. Which is, it kind of feeds on itself. So if you find something you love, go after it, do it. Because number one, if you love what you do and do what you love, it's the old, you never work a day in your life. Mm-hmm. Plus, if you're doing what you love, you have probably better staying power than someone who's doing something they hate. I can't stand to see somebody go, oh, I have to go to work again. I drive in every morning looking forward to getting here. So I love getting on the air, getting started, interacting with the listeners, knowing what I'm going to talk about, and seeing that change sometimes. I mean, I'll come in with a show sometimes, I know exactly what it's going to sound like, look like. It gets blown out of the water by something that happens on the show. But there's something about, it's a living, breathing thing that happens when you create something from that passion. And then it just grows from there. Matter of fact, we're about to expand beyond just a radio show. And that's an outgrowth of the passion that I have for what I do and the people around me. So, and it attracts people of like mind as well.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, folks who kind of grab the same passion. You have been a part of the show, for instance. A guy named Sean from Chesapeake has come from nowhere to become one of the most popular voices on the show. Folks who write for Bering Drift, I know you've had them on your segments. The folks from Bering Drift become regular contributors, and there's a back and forth, and so there's a synergy that happens there. Mm-hmm. It's not just the blog or just the radio show, it's this synergy. And it becomes, again, this living, breathing thing that sort of takes on a life of its own.
We've heard from other entrepreneurs that they've gotten to the cliff and at the edge of the cliff, and the biggest thing that they had to overcome was their fear of jumping off.
Man.
But it sounds like you've been pretty deliberate about your progression through this to get to the point where you are.
Yes and no. My original intent was just to do a morning show. And then things happened. That's a whole nother story. But things happened where I decided that we needed to grow what we were doing. And I got to tell you, I vividly remember that moment of fear where do I jump off that cliff or do I just go, okay, that's enough. We've gone as far as we can go. There's a point where we took on investors. And there was that moment of what if this thing doesn't work? What if? It's a big risk. There's a lot of money involved. And it's not now just my money or my efforts. So there was that moment of fear. It lasted for about 36 hours for me. So, I remember waking up and thinking, this is the point at which I have to make the decision. And it was a Thursday, and a Friday about midday, I kind of went, I know, we've charted this course, we know where we're going, and our plan is solid, and we're going to move forward with it. So there was that moment. Almost take your breath away moment of fear.
But then you got past that to the point where now you want to make it even bigger.
Right.
So how did you get to that point where wanting to make it bigger?
It's interesting you say that. I had a vision of where I sort of wanted to take it. And I had a little trouble getting investors and other people to catch on to that vision. And then I met a fellow who, I just went to him to put my corporate plan together as an attorney. And this guy was recommended to me. When I went to meet him, I found out that he had huge accomplishments in his past. So I was a little intimidated by meeting this guy. He came out of his office and said, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm a listener, I'm a fan. He sort of grabbed onto the same vision and then said, why don't you expand it a little? What would you do if you could expand it? And I said, well, now that you ask, we could do this, do that, do that. So he kind of opened up, for my own thinking, the possibilities beyond even what I was thinking. And we're on the road to achieve a lot of that right now. So I'm pretty excited about that.
So maybe in the back of your mind, you had this desire to make this bigger enterprise.
Sure.
But you needed the prompting maybe of somebody, or
I think
or maybe
this was kind of coincided with that moment of fear, and where I went, is it possible? Am I just daydreaming? But we've put a lot of solid effort into this thing. We know, both anecdotally and from some research we've done, that we're on the right track with an audience, with growing an audience, and we know what we need to do to grow it next. And again, it came kind of hand in hand with that moment of fear. Again, I'm a Christian, so I've had a lot of prayer in this, and it came after one of those moments where I go, okay, there were a lot of those moments where you kind of look up and go, really? This is the path you want me to take? I don't get that, but okay, I'll do it. And every time a new door is open, and then you have that moment where you go, okay, got it, thanks. This was one of those moments where I was going, am I doing the right thing? And that's when this guy said, I'm a fan. Oh, by the way, how about you do this, or have you thought about this? And I was like, yeah, I had thought about it, but I hadn't really allowed myself to consider it as maybe a reality, and that opened that door for me to do that.
So don't fear to dream big.
Oh, no.
And rely on your faith.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, without my faith, I would have lasted about a month in this deal. Maybe.
Wow. We're glad it's been longer than that.
All right.
Could you talk about, you've got your pulse because of your listeners, and you're out there, you're everywhere to be found. So you have your pulse on the Hampton Roads area.
Right.
Is the entrepreneurial spirit alive here? How is this area, do you think?
It is alive. I meet, especially through the show, and people understand it's an entrepreneurial expedition, if you will. They'll call in and say, here's what I'm doing, or I meet people out and about. But, and there's kind of both sides of that. And I was at one of the Occupy Norfolk meetings the other day to interview some people, this Occupy Everything, Protest Anything movement. And there was a young man there, maybe 20 years old. And I said, what about the American dream? He said, the American dream is dead once you wake up. And what a sad thing for him to believe that, because it's not. It's alive and well.
At such an age.
At such an age, yeah. He's given up. He's given up. And I refuse to believe that. My dad was a contractor, a builder, and he built things, and he was in business all of his life. So I understood working for yourself, and I kind of like that. But it's sad to me for people to say the American dream is dead. Even people who don't have the entrepreneurial spirit. Mike Kelly, what I do scares her to death. She likes to go in at a certain time and get off at a certain time and get a certain paycheck. And she works overtime and works hard and all that, but she wants to know that paycheck is going to be in the bank on this day. She go, look, there, it's deposited. With what I do, it doesn't work that way. But the income is only limited by my effort and being smart and working smart. So I like the challenge of being able to go out there and generate a bigger income, make a bigger business out of it, and make something out of nothing. Out of nothing, something. Not everybody feels that way. I think it's actually a small percentage, but the people who do, they see this economy as an opportunity in a weird way, because they understand if they can grow a business in this economy, when it does turn around, and we believe it will, that they will then be superstars. They will be well positioned. And I'll give you an example. Salespeople. In a really good economy, salespeople tend to get lazy, and they are what we call order takers. When the economy gets bad, you got to get out and bang on doors. You have to go searching for every penny. The guy or gal who's been out there searching for every penny along the way, once the economy turns around, they do exponentially better than anyone else around them. And then people will go, well, this comes easy to you. No. You and I have talked about this before. The luck thing, you're lucky. Well, luck is the intersection of opportunity and prepared. If you're prepared when the opportunity comes along and you're already working hard, then you can grab the opportunity and run with it, as opposed to trying to figure out what to do with it.
And succeed.
And succeed.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Steve.
My pleasure.
Thank you for inviting us into your studio and telling us your story.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us as Steve Goad and I go on the road in Hampton Roads, giving the American spirit a voice.